Damn, if I only had a longer lever, I could make this thing compress. If any of you watched my bio video, I mentioned that one of the side benefits is that you get to network with a lot of other craftsmen, a lot of knowledgeable people. And you can't know everything. I don't know everything. I mean, I have that basic background, that basic experience, but I haven't done everything. I haven't worked on everything. I got a good friend of mine, Ricky. Ricky has a lot more experience with doubles than I do. He's had the opportunity to study some fairly high-end shotguns, doubles. Matter of fact, the company that I worked for, he worked for also, and he was part of the product design team on the double barrel that the company put out. Anyway, he drops into the shop on a pretty regular basis, and critic or critiques, I'm not always sure, but Ricky often makes comments on the videos, and one of the things he keeps telling me, he says, "Bill, remember, take the tension off the springs first," which I know, but when you've never had a gun apart before, you don't know where the tension is coming from. Anyway, this locking lever, there's one big ass coil spring in here that had to come out. I literally had to use a lot of strength, a lot of force to compress that. Now the problem is that there was no easy way to compress that and avoid the screw that retained that. So come on over here, I'm going to show you the little pin that actually holds this spring in place and keeps that shotgun locked up. Now the spring that keeps tension on the locking lever and the locking pin underneath located right here, and though it doesn't look all that substantial, actually is. It's pretty thick coils, and for that to be compressed, it keeps tension on that locking lever. But what holds that in place is this very tiny pin. Its diameter is 90 thousandths, and it is threaded on this end, and the pin goes through these two slots, but the spring has to be fully compressed so that that pin can go over the top of the spring, and then you have to hold that pin compressed in order to engage the threads in this block where it has the female threading. And it is a lot of pressure required to keep that compressed. So there's a lot of ways you can do it. We can try to compress it with a punch, but the deal is that you're trying to do all this two-handed, and it takes a lot of strength to keep that compressed while you're trying to do all that. I managed to get it out, but I think when I go to put it back in, my dad has these screwdrivers that he modified years ago where he forked them so that he could put pressure on either side of something, a spring, and then there would be a groove in the center that again would allow that. So I think I'm going to have to rob one of his screwdrivers from the gunsmithing shop and see if I can't get that back in. But anyway, I didn't want to go back and put it all back together again to show you how that came apart. So that's how this works. And Ricky, I took the tension off the spring. Now this lever is still under some tension. There is a spring somewhere that I'm still missing, because when I bring it to neutral and release it, it wants to go back. Now there is one more screw, and that screw lives right here. And I don't know if there's a slot in this lever that this screw intersects, but right now I cannot get it out. It is in there pretty solid. I used the heat gun to get these other screws out on the side, but these plates are pretty thin, so I was able to get it hot. I've been using this heat gun, and I don't seem to be able to get enough heat into this block because there's a lot of steel here. So I think I'm going to bring the torch out and see if I can't release or let that screw come loose, because right now I cannot move it at all. So I'm going to use the propane torch and try to get some heat into that. But again, one of the problems is, and it's not likely, but you always want to consider it, is I don't want to change any of the hardness of the temper in the steel. This is old steel, but I can't get that screw loose right now. So let's give this a try. All right, that is starting to turn, so let's add a little more heat here. Okay, that's much happier now. And the amount of muck and guck that's coming out with that screw. That is pretty long, and it does have a point in it, which means it's engaging something. So what that did by removing that pin, as I mentioned, there was still some spring tension on the lever. Well, whatever that was in there, that's released that spring tension. So I don't know if it's a cam effect against the lever itself, or there's actually a spring in there, but we have released that spring tension. It's still too hot for me to touch, but I'll actually. Alright, so that lever is now starting to pop out. Boy, that is some hot. Damn. Okay. And yes, there is a spring in there. And that spring lives right there. So there's a pin that engages something. I'm not sure what it engages yet, but again, this is all about discovery. So we'll clean all this up in the latter part of the video, or in the latter part of the restoration, and we'll talk more about this at length and try to discover and understand what each of these parts do. We got the barrel locking mechanism disassembled. I want to go over briefly with you how it works, and mostly so that when I reassemble it for the future me, I understand how the parts have to relate to one another as they go back into the gun. So let me give you a close-up of how all those parts are assembled. There are three components. There is the lockup rod itself. It goes through a machined boss or block here, and then finally it goes into or through this retainer block. And this retainer block, you adjust it for lockup, for how tight or how loose that lockup is, based on how much length you give it here, and then this set screw goes in, and that set screw locks the throw of this lock against the back of the barrel itself. So then, releasing the set screw, we can then grab the lock rod or the locking mechanism itself and begin to pull it out. The set block falls off. The locking rod comes out completely. I'm sure there's a real name for this, I just don't know what it is. I should learn it. And then finally, that lock block needs to come out. Now, very specifically, the set screw has to be at the top, but for reassembly, there is a small boss here that comes off this, and that small boss then comes back and it hits or contacts the back of this block here, so that your contact is not across the entire face, but your contact is just that one spot. And then again, depending on what its length is on that rod, determines the amount of force or lockup of the barrel to the receiver, so that we get a good tight seal. So the design of the mechanism is really pretty simple, and it's actually pretty cool when you think about that. This entire technology is based on the capabilities of the machine shops in 1905. Anyway, this is really kind of cool. So the last thing that I need to do is an assembly of sorts. We'll put these components back together, and I'll lightly tighten this. That way it's all set up in the orientation that it's supposed to be. Then I can throw this in the box and not worry about it until I'm ready to do that part of the restoration, which really is going to come when I start the reassembly. This is the magic moment. We finally have this thing disassembled, and we can start the restoration process now. We haven't completely disassembled everything. So for instance, the forearm still has its components in place. The buttstock still has a few components in place. The lower trigger assembly still has its components in place. We'll disassemble those as we begin that restoration on those components themselves. That way I don't have to spend as much energy labeling everything and having to remember how all this stuff came apart as the restoration progress continues. So this is the big deal. At this point, I can start the polishing. I can start working on the wood itself, trying to figure out how much wood I'm going to end up removing to get this thing repaired. So all that final disassembly really relates to the restoration itself and where you are in that restoration. The next time we come back, I'm thinking I'm going to start stripping the gun stock down and finding out what it is I'm dealing with here. And we'll talk a little bit about the finish that appears to have been applied somewhere in the gun's past. Talk about what some of the repairs are that we're going to have to do to this. Some of this stuff I'm going to have to do in parallel. For instance, once I get this stripped, I'm going to have to reconstruct those panels that we talked about, and I need to do that and then allow the glues or the repairs to set up, or for the glues to set up before I keep moving through it. So while that's happening, I may do some work over here. I'm not entirely sure on this. I never know where a restoration is going to go, and we've talked about this before, that this is as much about discovery and decision making as it is just sort of jumping in and doing the work. we want to preserve as much of what's original to this gun as we can. And so far we've done that. I've got a few other projects that are coming into the shop, and I'm going to intermix those other projects with this project. So until the next time, like, tag, share, comment, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next video.